Hi, I'm Carlos Ferreira. Thanks for watching. This is a technical tutorial on how to set up Django on Bluemix. Bluemix is the platform as a service application development environment on the cloud. It allows you to build web apps, mobile apps, and deploy them and run them and build them on the cloud. Django is a web application framework written in Python. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can deploy Python-based applications on Bluemix. I recommend that you read and do some of the prerequisites that are required to get this set up. Some of those include getting your environment set up for using Bluemix. And if you go to my blog, bluemixstir.wordpress.com, you can go to the Hello World Bluemix with Python, and it'll give you a set of steps to get started in terms of creating an account with Bluemix, as well as installing the CF tool. The CF command line tool is what you use to invoke commands to interact with the Bluemix environment. And I'll be showing you some of those. Once you have an account, you're going to want to log in using the CF login command. So I'm going to jump over here to my window. I'm going to type CF login, and it'll connect to the endpoint, which is the api.ng.bluemix.net. Enter my ID. So now I'm connected to my Bluemix environment. Once you're logged in, you can just type CF by itself, and it'll give you the list of commands that are available. If you don't know, in my case, I had previously signed in, and therefore my API was set in terms of which Bluemix environment I was going to connect to. If you type CF dash API, it shows you which one that you're connected to. To set the API, you can do CF and then API and then the name of the API. And that'll set it. Now you're connected to that API. All right, so now I'm in a directory called C Cloud Foundry, and there's a certain set of prerequisites that you need to do to be able to use Django. I'm not going to redo those, but I will explain them. Again, from the bluemixstir.wordpress.com blog, you want to install a utility called pip, and pip allows you to install Python modules for your application, and you can also install Django utilizing pip. So to install pip, you want to go to this URL, this website here, and download it for your particular platform. You can use the instructions here on how to install it. So on Windows, you just type, if you have Python installed, you just type python get-pip.py, and you should be able to install it. After that, you want to type python pip install Django, and that will install Django. After you install Django, you can type the Django commands in the command line prompt. So you can type manage.py version. And this will show you the version of Django that's been installed. All right, next we're going to do the django-admin.py command to start a new project for our new application, which is the one we called First Django. And what that does is it creates in the Cloud Foundry directory here, you notice it's created a directory called First Django, which is our project. And within that project, there is a manage.py command. That's the command that we'll be using to invoke the development server, and do other commands. It also created an app within my project called First Django, and that has the WSGI file. It also has the settings.py file. For those of you that are familiar with Django, these are the way that you specify what apps are installed, your connection to your databases, and other settings as well. And then it also created a urls.py, and this is how it gets to the different URL contexts for your web app. Okay, we're going to CD into our project, first to Django. And we're going to finish installing some of the other modules that we're going to be using for our first Django app. One is, in addition to installing the Django, we also want to install our database, our Postgres database. And you can just say pip install psgcopg2, and that will install that. I've already installed it, so in this case it's actually going to say that it's already installed, and it says requirement already satisfied. The other modules I recommend you install are dj-database URL. This allows you to use environment variables across development and test for your database URL, hostname, user ID, and password. I'm not going to go through all of the prerequisites in terms of actually installing them because I've already installed some of them. But you can also, in addition to the Postgres SQL module, Python module that I showed you earlier, you had to install using pip, you also have to install PostgreSQL software. I'm using Windows, so you can go to the link that's on the screen here, and you can install that. Once you install it, you want to read this article here on how to create the database. So you log in using Postgres. You enter the server hostname, the database that you created, and then the user ID and password listed out. And then I created a role for the ID that I'm going to use for managing the database. And then I created a database called test with the owner of my ID, Carlos. All right, so now we have a PostgreSQL database installed. We also have created a database that exists. And what you want to do now is the first time you run to Django, you want to just populate the database. To populate the database into Django, you want to type, you notice the directory I'm in my project directory. That project directory has a file called manage.py. It has an app in it called first to Django. I want to type manage.py sync db. And the first time it does this, it's going to actually create all the necessary tables that it needs to be able to run your project and app. And it'll also ask you if you want to create a super user. You may want to use the same name that you used to create the database table earlier. So I'm going to say yes, and then provide the user ID. I'm going to call the user ID Carlos, and I'm just going to type in my address. So now it's created the tables that it requires to run to Django for the app, and as well as the super user. So recall earlier I said one of the prerequisites is to install dj-database URL. It's already installed here. And the reason you want to use that is because this is how we set the environment variable for our database host name, user ID, and password. And obviously that's going to change as you move from your local development environment up to your cloud environment on Bluemix. And you're going to reference environment variables using this module in your settings file. So you're going to want to go into your first Django app, go into your settings file, and I'm using idle to edit. You could also use Notepad or whatever your favorite editor is. And then what you want to do is you want to go in here and modify your database settings to point to your database. And you're going to import dg underscore database underscore URL, and then you're going to set the database to default, and then you're going to read the URL config out of the environment variable. You're also going to set the environment variables for your local database. So you can go to My Computer, Advanced System Settings, Environment Variables, and then you're going to want to click on New for Environment Variable, type in database URL, type PostgreSQL, Postgres : your user ID, your password, at localhost, the port that the database is listening on for PostgreSQL, and then the database name. Hit OK and save. Now we're going to check to see on the development environment here on my local machine whether or not the Django is running properly. I can type manage.py, run server, and what this will do is it'll actually run the web application locally. And you notice here that's 127.0.0.1, which is my local IP address, and the port number. It also tells you what the Django settings it's using to run the development server. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new window, type localhost, and you can see here that the Django has installed properly. It actually says that this static HTML page is running and working. So this shows that we've installed the Django successfully and it's able to serve up static pages. Next, we want to make sure that we can connect to the database. And as you recall, we created a user ID, a Power User ID. One of the apps that gets installed is the admin app. And you can take a look at that app. If you edit your settings, you'll see one of the installed apps is the Django contrib.admin. And also the other thing you want to do is you can look at your URLs to see here. There's also a URLs for the admin pages that come with the Django here. So we're going to go ahead and try to log into that using the user ID that we created earlier. So we type /admin. This brings up the Django admin site. And then we go ahead and try to log in. And we're able to log in now with the user ID that we created earlier. So we now have our Django website and web application running locally in our development environment. What we want to do now is we want to do the same process using Bluemix. So let's show you how to do that. Okay, you can see here when I was running it, it actually does some standard out in the window where I started up the server. I'm going to show you now the files that you need to add to be able to run an application up on Bluemix. So if we look at our directory where we created the first Django project, you notice the Django added a database file here, SQLite 3. We don't actually use that because we're using Postgres. But we're going to go ahead and add a couple of files here to make it so that this will run up on Bluemix. The first file is simply a run file, .sh file, and this will be the file that actually gets invoked and run up on the Bluemix server. This is what the run file looks like. It's a bash script, and this is simply telling it to check what port the app will be running on. And similar to the commands that were run locally, where we typed manage py syncdb, we're going to do that as well on the server with -- no input. So we can't answer those questions interactively about creating the user ID. So instead we're going to echo those in. And so we type echo, and then what this will do is it'll open up a Power shell for Python, a Python shell using the Django, and we'll import the user module, and then we'll actually invoke the command in Python to create a new user called admin with an ID, email address, and then a password. And then this is the command to actually invoke the shell. So this is the command to invoke the shell. These are what we're going to do inside the shell. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually invoke the command to manage py, run server, just like you did earlier in the development environment. So that's the first command we're going to create, run.sh bash script to basically create the user as well as actually run the Django server. The next file we're going to create is a manifest file. The manifest file tells Bluemix what are the database services that this will bind to and other services that this application will bind to. So obviously we're going to have to bind to a database service. It also tells information about the startup command. So we're going to create, there's a specific format that's required. So you list your applications. In this case, we're going to call it first to Django, right? That's what we called our app. You can set what the memory is going to be, 256 megabytes. And then we set the command here to be the argument bash, because we're going to run a bash script, the one that I just showed you earlier, the run.sh. And then we're going to specify also a build pack. A build pack is what allows you to run and invoke different runtimes on Bluemix. And this is the build pack that allows you to run Python applications up on Bluemix. And then you're going to go ahead and create the path. So the manifest file in this case is already in the directory for our project, first to Django. So for the path, you can just type dot. And then you're going to also say what are the services that this application binds to. And in our case, we're going to use a Postgres SQL database that you can create. And I can show you how to create that. We're going to go ahead and save this. All right, so now we're going to give you a quick explanation of how you can use Bluemix to set up your Python app. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Use your IBM.com ID. And what you can do is you can go to your dashboard, which is where it goes by default. And what this does is it quickly shows you the different applications that you've deployed. In this case, I have 3 applications and they're all up and running. So I have crawl, hello to Django, simple Django. It also shows you this list of services that you have. So I have some database services here that are actually also up and running. And I can also see for each one of these database services, what are the applications that have been bound to it. So here you can see crawl has been bound to this database, hello to Django has been bound to this database, and then simple to Django has been bound to this database. I can see the overall health that these are running. I can, so what I'm going to do now is, the first thing I'm going to want to do is create a service, which is the Postgres SQL database. I can go over here and add service. And when you add services, these are all the services that are available with Bluemix. We have services for mobile, for example, web application development as well. And there's a whole variety of them that you have here. Email services, so for example, if you want to send and receive emails and do activation emails for your web app, you could add that as an add-on to your app with SendGrid. The one that I want, though, is the Postgres SQL database. This is the one that I used. You can learn more about that application by clicking on it, the service as well. So we're going to go ahead and create this Postgres SQL database. You notice here it's version 9.1. So I'm going to say Postgres SQL dash Django, and I'm going to go ahead and create it. So you want to create the service ahead of time. You notice I didn't set the application here. I'll bind my first to Django application when I deploy it using the manifest file that I created earlier. Now, given that we call this Postgres SQL to Django, we're going to have to so we're going to, this is our database that we're going to create, Postgres SQL to Django. We're going to create an application. So we're going to just go ahead and create an app. Hit create, and here's our new application that's just been created. Our service is right there, PostgreSQL to Django, and we can go to all apps, and we're going to go ahead and modify this name. We're going to go ahead and rename the app, and we're going to call it First to Django. Save. All right, so now if we go to all of our apps, you can see that we've renamed our app First to Django. You can see that our First to Django app is actually now bounded to our PostgreSQL database service that we just created. We want to make sure that this is the name of the service we also reference in our manifest file. So we'll go back to our manifest file, and we'll make sure that we're referencing the right service. And we can go ahead and resave that. All right, so now we're going to go back and we're going to stop our local development server by hitting Control Break. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a command to actually push our application from our local development environment, which is where we were running it here. You can see now we have our manage.py, our manifest file, our run.sh files that we added. And to do that, we're just going to do the command to deploy is cf push, and then the name of our app. In this case, it's First to Django. And then what we want to do is actually open up another window here in our First to Django, where we've already logged in, and we want to do cf logs as we deploy our app. What this is actually doing is it's using the information in the manifest file to actually deploy. But one thing we forgot to do, actually there's one more thing that we forgot to do, which is we forgot to include a file, and you can see here no requirements.txt was provided. So we're going to go ahead and generate a requirements.txt file and then try to redeploy again. So to do that, you just type pip, and then you type the command freeze, and then you pipe that into a file called requirements.txt. All right, so let's take a look at what it's the bare minimum that I need inside of my requirements.txt file. We need the Django. We need DG database URL to read the environment variables to get the database name, user ID, and password import. We also need the PSY copy G2 to be able to actually invoke the database commands to connect to the database from within Python. So let's go ahead and we'll save this, and then we'll go ahead and try to run the app by pushing it again. So we're going to go ahead and also up here start our logs for our First to Django app. And then we're going to go over here. We're actually going to go ahead and say cf push First to Django to actually deploy. And what this is going to do is it's going to read our manifest file, and inside of there it'll have the information about what build pack it should use. In this case, we're using the Python build pack, and that's what allows us to run different languages and runtimes beyond the boilerplate ones that are already available on Bluemix. And it'll also, in the manifest file, it'll also invoke what our run.sh. In this case, it's actually going through also and installing the modules that we specified in our requirements.txt file based on using the Python command. So it's uploading the droplet with our code, and it's trying to now start the application. You notice here on the top it actually installed and ran the commands to create the user ID. Over here you can see it. And it also created the tables and then created a user ID admin based on what we specified in the bash run.sh script. And you can see here that it actually successfully launched and is running now. So now what we can do is we can go back to our dashboard inside of Bluemix, and we can take a look And we now have our app, which is our first Django app that we just installed. You notice it says it's running. We can click on it, and we can notice here that it is running and it's bound to our database. And then over here it has the routes, which are basically the URLs to actually invoke the database, to invoke the web application. We'll go ahead and click that, and you can see here it actually launched the page for Django, and there's the URL, firstdjango.mybluemix.net. And then we can also just see if our admin module is working by clicking admin and then using the user ID and password that we passed in to make sure that the database works. And we can see here that in fact it does. And so now I can go ahead and add users, for example, and begin using Django. I hope this tutorial was helpful and will help you be able to build your Django apps on top of Bluemix. Thanks.